Is good food getting impacted by climate change?
A lot of chocolate is going to disappear, a lot of coffee is going to reduce, and the pollinators disappear. All bets are off. On some foods, we've lost, I think, 70% plus nutrition since the 70s already. 60-70% of your economy is a derivative of what happens at the farm. India should have had maybe 200 plus beers. Senator in the Roman Senate recorded this, that we seem to need endless supplies of whatever people in India pluck from the wild, load the ships and send to us. And in return, we have to send gold because they need nothing from us.
Wow.
It's interesting that for every one thing that I've tried to grow, the farm has given back two things that we never planned to grow. And we've learned to eat that. What we had to learn was to work in sync with the land, not demand it to produce for us. Apparently, most guava that we get that's grown around here has more nutrition than an apple. Building your assets is the most sensible thing you can do. And in a village, at a farm, your assets are in the water, they are in the soil, they are in the biodiversity, they are in your knowledge of that biodiversity. It's in the livelihoods that the entire cluster of villages had around that biodiversity. I would love to see like a dozen Akshayakalpas, make this happen so that people can start believing in this diversity, can start believing in their place and their ecosystems.
Yeah.
We have lost about 70, 80, 90% of this asset in different parts of the country. The Deccan Plateau is 90% down on carbon, 70% down on groundwater. Right? It's starting to happen to the Western Ghats. Climate is a symptom of these bad trade-offs. It's not like we can keep making these bad trade-offs in our places and suddenly have good outcomes on the planet. Right? How many ever solar panels we throw at it? We're not going to get out of this. It's strange and weird that in farmland India you have a nutrition problem. This produces coal, that produces coffee. This is where rice comes from, that is where wheat comes from. There's a very colonial way of looking at the world. It's not just a shrinkage of biodiversity, it's a shrinkage of imagination. What needs to change, for instance, in policy? If we were measuring nutrition instead of yield, or also measuring nutrition, we would actually chase very different outcomes. The difference in standard of living and quality of life.
Yeah.
Right? A pizza may be great standard of living, but it's definitely not great health and quality of life in the long run. We are at a point in history where if challenged, people would discard religion before convenience. So you have excuses like, I don't have the time. What's the point of doing that? It's the government's job. I'm paying my taxes. But it's your own kid's bloodstream.
Can good food impact climate change? Welcome to Good Food Talks with me, Vachna Shetty. My guest today is someone who has been giving this world a reality check about climate crisis. He doesn't believe in subtle optimistic messages or false hope. He relies on science, data, facts to shake the world up from its slumber because the world needs to wake up and it needs to wake up now. His social media is stark and is reflective of his belief that we have failed our future generations. As a climate warrior, how does he think the climate crisis is affecting the food on our plate? Can money make consumers make better food choices? And what is the future of farming? Let's find out from our guest today, Sameer Shisodia, an aspiring farmer and CEO of Rainmatter Foundation, an organization that also advocates for good food for consumers. Hi Sameer, welcome to Good Food Talks.
Hey, thanks for having me here.
So Good Food Talks is a series of conversations that we're trying to have with thought leaders, but thought leaders who are also conscious consumers, who think about, what they get into their house, the kind of food that they consume, where it comes from. And probably we are looking at this becoming a curation of knowledge as far as good food is concerned. So thank you so much for joining us on this conversation. We've seen that, your social profiles are always talking about this one line. You end all your talks with that one line, which is sorry kids.
Yeah.
Today we want to start the podcast with that line and we want to know what is it all about.
So yes, I would like to take this opportunity to apologize to anybody who's 27 and below on behalf of everybody in my generation for the planet we are leaving them behind. We, especially our generation, because the previous generation did not have access to the same level of information, the understanding of what's gone wrong as we did, while they were already on that path. Our generation, unfortunately, we did have the data, the knowledge, the developing science around this. But if I'm to be honest about it, we collectively chose to do nothing about this. So I think some of us at least need to take responsibility for it and at least start to apologize for our inaction. So that's where it comes from.
Coming to food,
Yeah.
I would like to use the knowledge that you have around climate and everything that is happening as far as climate change is concerned, and speak to you about the interplay between good food and climate change. I want to ask you two questions. The first one is good food getting impacted by climate change? And the second is, can good food impact climate change?
Yeah, I think everything is going to get impacted by climate change, right? Like the kokum on the west coast, the coffee in Malnad, the yields of everything are, a lot of what we grow is very, very temperature sensitive, rainfall sensitive. A lot of it is under stress as we speak. A lot of chocolate is going to disappear. A lot of coffee is going to reduce. Wheat has already seen a stress over the last 2 years. The government locked down on paddy, and these are two very large categories of food that we eat. If you go after small trace things here and there, it's unpredictable because as the insect populations collapse, and we are already in the middle of one, and the pollinators disappear, all bets are off. So we don't really know how this is going to play out. There's some research on a few such categories, but see, the interesting thing is we've already reduced our food system to very few choices. The variety in every part of the food palette that we had has shrunk dramatically. There's one variety of banana across the world, except in India. There's hardly there's a single-digit percentage of the varieties of paddy we had earlier, and all of these are susceptible to temperature changes, rainfall changes, a lot more than the hardier varieties that existed earlier, because we optimize for yield and not for resilience. So yes, enjoy your food
while it lasts.
while it lasts.
But is this is it reducing because of climate change, or is it also reducing because of demand? I mean, are we as consumers becoming more comfortable with a certain different palette?
It's both. As we constrain our imagination to a certain kind of a certain set of foods, we send a message to the farm to grow more of that and less of everything else. So the variety drops dramatically. That, by the way, itself is a driver of a lot of what we see as biodiversity collapse and climate change. And in turn, when we select for yield and a few specific species, the resilience of the overall system drops. And the moment you have a little bit of variability, your food starts to disappear. So yeah, I think these are very deeply connected things, and I don't think you can point it. You can boil it down to one reason or the other, but it has very, very deep links with climate at this point in time.
And is it also linked to nutrition? In the food that we are now getting, like
that is actually linked to the pressure on the food systems for yield. So it's plain biology, it's plain mathematics actually, that from the same soil, as you keep trying to increase the yield dramatically, you will see a drop in nutrition, because it's the same soil biology system that's producing nutrition for you, right? So it'll actually sustain up to a particular part of the curve and then start to drop. And the evidence is that on some foods, we've lost, I think, 70% plus nutrition since the 70s already. Wow. Across all foods, we've lost nutrition. I read somewhere that you need to consume 5 apples today to get the nutrition you used to get out of one, or something like that. But it's true for everything we eat today. Yeah.
If the biodiversity is maintained, for example, if we don't go towards that single variety of rice or single variety of coffee, for example, how does that impact nutrition? Does that impact nutrition?
Of course it does. I mean, see, what you're eating is really your soil, the nitrogen in the air, the water that feeds the food systems, right? All the crops you grow, all the fruit you grow. So finally, it's a sum total of that. And a richer set of nutrients in the soil made available through a richer soil biology will show up in your food, will show up in your gut, right? Will show up in your nutrition for sure. So a wider variety of species growing in the soil contributes to a wider variety of soil biome under the surface, which releases larger amount and variety in nutrition available to the plant, and which is your nutrition really. So most certainly, I mean, soil, the soil biome, your gut biome are the final determinants of your nutrition in life, right? So there is no getting away from that core biological fact. Yeah.
So if climate change continues the way it is continuing, and most likely it is continuing, what happens to the rice that we're eating, the wheat that we're eating, the vegetables and fruits that we're eating? What happens to all of this? How is my plate, going to get affected?
It's extremely difficult to place soothsayer on it. I think we've already lost a lot of nutrition. We are starting to see stress on the food systems in terms of yield itself, which was our big chase. I mean, since the Green Revolution in India and across the world, really, we've as the populations have grown, we've chased yield as our primary metric in the food system, at the cost of nutrition, at the cost of diversity. Now yield itself is starting to face stress. There are big stressors that are very, very likely. Now it's a function of which tipping points tip over first as the planet changes. What parts of the country, what parts of the world are affected first? If you have excessive rainfall at the wrong time in the coffee growing regions, coffee drops by 70%. If you have too little rainfall in the paddy fields, you get a lot of pest infestations. If you have flooding, you get crop loss. So I think we've already started to see this play out. It's extremely difficult to say what will get hit first. All we can do is really get back to the basics of what works in a particular region, what works in a particular geography, in terms of all the 700 kinds of things that were growing there, including a lot of our food, and diversify. It's insurance, right? Because naturally, as these changes happen, some species drop off, some actually benefit from the same changes. So the natural world itself is very anti-fragile. Can we marry that anti-fragility and actually buy our insurance in a better understanding of this anti-fragility in biology? So it's not just food and food systems as we imagine them today, but it's what the natural world can be, and can we grow food in sync with the natural world rather than in a battle mode as we do now. Yeah.
And so coming to the second question, which is, can good food impact climate change?
Most certainly. So now what's good food, right? So there's it can be good for your taste buds. It can be good for your short-term health, your long-term health. It can be good for strength training. It can be good for your resistance to all sorts of diseases. It can be good for your soil, your water, your health. So, for instance, one thing that I have tried to adopt in my life is to what I call eat the farm. Right? If your farm grows 7 different things, your diet should have all 7 of them. Right? If you're not eating a diverse diet, if you're not eating seasonal, if you're not eating something from the region, you're not going to send the signals to the people involved in the food systems, whether it's the traders or the growers or anybody or the government, right? That you care about diversity. In turn, they will not care about diversity. And in turn, you will actually have very, very fragile food systems. So your food has a very, very direct impact on climate, both positively and negatively, through these signals, right? Your choice of what you eat in the kitchen on a daily basis will show up in the fields. The choices there will show up in the soil. The choices there will show up as excess nitrogen in your rivers, pollution in the air, as we're seeing in Punjab, and so on and so forth. So it's most certainly linked to climate change. It's also linked to your health. It's also linked to our collective economic outcomes. So food is a very, very deep part of the economy. I would hazard a guess that maybe 60-70% of your economy is a derivative of what happens at the farm. So yeah, I think we need to be very, very wise in our choice of what we eat.
You want to elaborate on that food is a large part of the economy. Like good food, for example, how can that impact the economy?
I mean, you just look around in Bangalore, the number of startups trying to serve you food, right? The number of people whose lives and livelihoods are dependent on that. I mean, most of our economy revolves around food outside of leisure and entertainment. And even a lot of leisure and entertainment also comes from that, right? It's also built around food. Food is the centerpiece of a lot of these decisions. The ideas and the signaling we actually create around that. For instance, India should have had maybe 200 plus beers, right? India was beer country, but we are actually chasing ideas around beer that have come from different parts of the world, but not from here, which means we do not value our grains for that part of our life, which leads to leisure, choices in leisure. And we have created a certain imagery around that, right? How do we change that imagery such that our food systems are strengthened to be more locally relevant, to be more resilient, to be, if you did your beers out of all our native grains, they just need less water. They are less water intensive. Most of a state's electricity budget, or a lot of the state's electricity actually goes into irrigation systems, 30% plus, right? Smarter agriculture is smarter energy, right? Less energy is less pressure on thermal plants. You are suddenly not, or you are less worried about thermal versus nuclear and questions like these. It's not the solar or the renewable revolution that's going to get you out of this. It's smarter choices in every part of your design, including food, including your leisure, including your housing, and so on and so forth. So I think these are, again, like I said, very, very deeply connected, and choices we make on a daily basis show up in these systems. Yeah.
I recently visited this one farmer's, Akshayakalpa's farmer's farm. Her name is Chandrakala, and she's got maybe 3 acres of land, right. And she's growing maybe about 30 different types of fruits.
Wow.
Maybe about 25-30 different varieties of vegetables.
Wow.
She's growing the fodder that her cow needs. She's converting it into silage.
Wow.
She has hens. Yeah. She has cows. She has goat, I think I saw in the farm.
Yeah.
So she's creating this, beautiful ecosystem for herself.
Yeah.
And she's, like when we were speaking to her, she's standing tall in that farm, yes. And, like the confidence that's there on her face that, you know what, like, I know I'm taking care of everything that I need and my family needs.
Yeah.
And when she does that and she's gone so local, she has a small farm pond, she's done trenching and bunding.
Yeah.
So and if that can happen in that small piece of land,
Yeah.
and if more and more people are able to do this,
Yeah.
and get resilient, to the changes that are
Yeah.
coming,
Yeah.
that would possibly be
Of course. So there's an interesting anecdote around this. Back in the day, way before Christ was born, somebody, actually a senator in the Roman Senate, recorded this, that we seem to need endless supplies of whatever people in India pluck from the wild, load the ships and send to us. And in return, we have to send gold because they need nothing from us.
Wow.
Right? That last bit got my attention, because they need nothing from us because they're self-sufficient and their ecology and their biology provides for everything. So India actually got rich because we needed nothing in return.
Yeah.
Right? And we actually didn't need the gold either. So we made jewelry out of it, and we put it in temples and did all sorts of interesting things out of it. Right? Because we actually had everything we needed around us. And that's what she's doing. She's managing her water. She's managing her fodder, right? Which means she has dairy, which means she has access to milk. She has a wide variety of nutrition in her farm, right? In her village. She can trade it with other people who are growing other things in the village, right? It's a very rich life. She's probably physically fitter because of this, right? Her farm is definitely more resilient than anything that looks like a monoculture farm, right? In fact, around Bangalore itself, a couple of years ago, when unseasonal rainfall took out, I think, 70% of the millets around here, any farm which had more than 2 crops, mixed crops in the field, actually stood firm.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so it's magical what biology can do. I mean, these plants have had a few million years to adapt to the planet, right? So we should trust them a little bit, and that's what she's doing. She's trusting biology. She has more faith in her land than most of us do, right? And she's now she has the skills, the belief system that's in sync with her place, and I think that's where the answers really lie.
So we know you're trying your hands at farming. You have a farm in Coorg. You have also built a forest called Tamarind Valley Collective. So how has it been being a farmer? Do you think farming is viable?
Viable is a very interesting word. I will not call myself a farmer yet. I have a fair amount of faith in the land, and we have been rewilding the land while growing food in it. In fact, we are trying to see what food is wild friendly and can grow in that context. The 100-acre collective, the Tamarind Valley Collective that we built out here, was extremely degraded land. And today, after I think 7 years, it hosts 130 plus species of birds, 28 species of reptiles. We have bison coming in, we have the odd elephant coming in. We've seen the small Indian turtles around there. It hosts a lot of wildlife, and it grows food in very interesting bursts. We once had, I think, 700 kgs of turmeric. We had more okra, and we had more sour beans than the village could eat.
Oh wow!
Right. So it produces like that, right? What we had to learn was to work in sync with the land, not demand it to produce for us, right? And it gives. It doesn't always gives what you want it to, right? So my being a farmer has been more about that learning than about my skills as a farmer are very, very poor right now, right? But it's interesting that for every one thing that I've tried to grow, the farm has given back 2 things that we never planned to grow, and we've learned to eat that. So that's been very, very satisfying to watch. That nature bounces back dramatically quickly. The positive feedback loops in nature are much, much stronger than we imagine. And all this happens while you're hosting butterflies and moths and reptiles and whatnot. So that part of it is indeed very satisfying to watch. Is it viable? Now, viable in terms of monetary economics, in the current paradigm, where all your markets are elsewhere, etc., it is a big question. The farm that you just described, is it viable for her? Most certainly, right? She's getting all her food out of it, right? She's resilient in the face of changing weather patterns, in the face of changing climate, and so on and so forth. It's conversion to valuation. There's core value in the farm. There's core value in the soil. There's core value in the water. It just so happens that the market values, the valuation that the market provides is only a certain part of this whole cycle. Right? Today, as people are looking at carbon markets, people are starting to look at ecosystem services and starting to account for that. Right? We're starting to understand the true value of what we have not been able to value monetarily. At my farm, it takes me 124 hours to feel more optimistic, feel healthier. I get hungrier.
No.
I think that's huge value.
Yeah.
So outside of the monetary system, it's more than viable. It's necessary, right? We have to figure out how to make the monetary system acknowledge this reality a little more.
Yeah. I've been an organic consumer for more than 12 years, and with very little knowledge about organic before I joined Akshayakalpa, right? And now with conversations, more and more conversations with people around with Shashi, you grow as a consumer as well. And there was this time where I was trying to buy jackfruit, and I wanted an organic jackfruit.
Yeah.
And Shashi said, there's no need to look for an organic jackfruit. Just pick it up. All jackfruit is organic.
Yeah.
So I think what I learned from that exercise is that when you go after what is famous and, what all of us want a lot of, it's not going to be organic.
No.
But if you're going after something that not too many people are fond of, most likely the regular things that you get in the market can also be.
Yes. A friend of mine, he runs a food safety company, and he was telling me a very interesting anecdote around this. Apparently, most guava that you get that's grown around here has more nutrition than an apple.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So just pick the cheap guava,
That is so cool.
Yeah.
So what is happening with farming. You've seen it from two sides. One, from the side of climate change, from the side of Rainmatter, and the other as someone who went deep into it, and you've seen what is happening there as well.
Yeah.
So there is, of course, a contradiction that you would be seeing over here. So how do you live with that contradiction?
So some of us obviously have a platform financially and otherwise to start to make a change, and we should. A lot of city farmers actually get a lot of flack saying, you guys come in and you can afford to do this because your source of income is elsewhere. And I say, it's precisely why we need to do this. Because we have the platform, right? The 100 acres that we have regenerated there are benefiting the village in terms of pollination services, in terms of the amount of water that's captured there, in terms of supporting wildlife, which is not always visible as a benefit in the first order, but eventually adds up, right? It's a contradiction only in the here and now sense. In any long-term sense, building your assets is the most sensible thing you can do. And in a village, at a farm, your assets are in the water, they are in the soil, they are in the biodiversity, they are in your knowledge of that biodiversity, which I lack right now. I don't understand which of those plants are medicine and what I can make a rope out of, and so on and so forth. It's in the livelihoods that the entire cluster of villages had around that biodiversity. Today we think of a village as a farming system, but a village was much more than a farming system. There were 50, 90, 120 different livelihoods in a cluster of villages around this biodiversity, right? People knew what to do with it. The joke is sometimes that farming was really a Bitcoin engine which drove this economy every year, right? It's called agriculture for a reason, right? It was not called agronomy in the past, right? So, unless you have these assets, you're not going to be able to convert them to value. And that is the tragic reality of India that's not very visible right now, is that we have lost about 70, 80, 90% of this asset in different parts of the country.
Oh my God.
If your asset base is down to zero, you can't whip a zero asset base into income tomorrow. Any financial advisor will give you this, right? You've been essentially converting your FDs into a very poor quality of income, right? And that's really very poor economics, right? So in a medium term sense or in a long term sense, I don't think there's a contradiction in this. I think building your assets for the long term is the most sensible thing to do. And these are not just the farmers' assets, but these are the country's assets. Imagine running out of water.
Yeah.
Right? The abstract layers of economics, urban civilization, and so on and so forth, very quickly cease to exist when you just take water out of the system.
Yeah.
It's the same for soil health. It's the same for pollinators. And I think we are at a juncture in history where we are just starting to see this and starting to realize this. So I don't think there's a contradiction in this.
Like the purpose with which Akshayakalpa exists is that we believe that a lot of wrong has been done to farmers and to farming and to food in the last few decades. And we're trying to make it right in whatever ways possible. And as a marketer, in the storytelling of Akshayakalpa, something that, I always speak about is that 2,000 farmers are leaving farming every single day in India. The amount of arable land is reducing in India. Yeah. But the additional points that now you are, speaking of, which is water disappearing from the villages of India, just makes it even more,
It's assets. It's a core assets. Yeah.
That's scary.
Well, it's also a good time to realize and rebuild because we have weakened 90% of our landscape. Right? If you look at it from an asset perspective, it's weak today. Yeah. The Deccan Plateau is 90% down on carbon, 70% down on groundwater. Right? It's starting to happen to the Western Ghats. Native trees are disappearing. The borewell rig has entered a district like Coorg, where my farm is, and that's very, very scary to me right now. Can we change our growing and farming practices? In Kodagu, for instance, we need to diversify. Coffee is not going to cut it. Coffee is under threat from climate, but coffee is also a very large monocrop in a sense. It's shade grown and all of that, but there's so much that grows there beautifully in the wild. My farm is right now full of colocasia. There's a burst of colocasia all over the place. Thick green leaves and absolutely zero effort and maintenance. It's perfect do nothing farming.
Oh wow.
Right? You can eat the stems and you can prepare it in a gazillion different ways. You can eat the tubers, you can eat the leaves. It's great compost. There's ferns by the streams in the monsoon. There's I think half a dozen different greens that grow right through the year. All fruit grows easily. Fruit is not cheap, by the way.
Yeah.
Akshayakalpa buys fruit from the farmers at a very, very viable price. Yeah. Right? Now, if Coorg as a district wakes up to this fact, it can actually become the center of production for a lot of variety of greens and fruit and wild foods and so on and so forth, forgotten foods. Right? We had crabs in the streams, we had fish in the streams. They're all gone because of herbicides. Right? That's free protein. It's diversity. It's wildlife. And I think it's a huge loss to see all this go. So I think this transition is needed, and I would love to see like a dozen Akshayakalpas, make this happen, so that people can start believing in this diversity, can start believing in their place and their food systems.
Yeah. I think the signaling is what is most important.
Yes. Yeah.
As consumers, if we start asking for the things that are disappearing more and more, and as loud as we can, the message will, I think, at some point percolate, and you can possibly bring back some of these. But if we don't ask for it and we just go after the apples and the kiwis that are coming from New Zealand and God knows where else, we're just going to keep going down this rabbit hole.
Yes.
Yeah. So just a last point on this, that sometimes there's a lot of cynicism that sets in even for us, right? Like we feel like this is a dying profession, that in the next 20, 30 years, there won't be good food left anymore. The question we ask ourselves is, why should anyone grow good food anyways? What do you think?
Because you like to eat it, I think food will grow. We will change. With changing climate, food will change. With a better understanding of what's going wrong, many of us, what Akshayakalpa's farmers are doing, what we are trying to do at our collective farm, and I know dozens of people who are running these experiments, will start to grow more diverse, right? At the very least, these islands will continue to exist, and hopefully we'll be able to regenerate out of that. So I don't think food is going away. I don't think farming is going away. I don't know about profession, but like I said, we used to call it agriculture for a reason, right? I think food is a very deep part of our culture. So in one form or the other, the skills, the right attitudes towards food and the land, they will continue to exist. What form and what place they find in our society and in our economic setup, I think that's up for debate. But I don't think the fundamental instinct and need and value around food is disappearing anytime soon.
You keep talking about climate being a place problem. I would love for us to speak a little bit about that, and how we need a better sense of the house. It would be great for our viewers to understand what both of these things mean to start with, and then I would like to ask you a question on the back of that.
Okay. So at Rainmatter, which I have been running for the last 4 years, when we started out understanding climate, we realized that it's not enough to look at it purely as an energy transition issue, or frame it in the parameters commonly framed through carbon and temperature. It is a problem of the planet. The planet is a place, and so is every village, so is your city ward, so is your home. At your home, you are actually looking at all the variables that matter to you, right? And whether it's health or nutrition or income or whatever, and managing trade-offs across them. What we are doing in our larger economic system is just making bad trade-off after bad trade-off. The last 500 trillion bad trade-offs is what things like climate have added up to. Climate is a symptom of these bad trade-offs. When you push for yield, you reduce soil health. You increase water usage. When you decide to drive a car in Bangalore, you accrue debt in the air. You accrue debt in congestion as well, right? And in your health as well. So finally, it boils down to all of these parameters at place, because only the owner of the house can actually take charge of these trade-offs, can take charge of all these parameters. So the question became, who owns the village anymore? Right? So each service provider, each arm of government, each specialist is not going to be able to, like the plumber walks into your house, they're going to do a great job of plumbing. They don't care about your furniture. They can't be responsible for everything. You are not a doctor, but you are in charge of health at your home. So it is at place where all of these variables come into one, into focus on one scoreboard, on one dashboard, and where you can understand and make better trade-offs. And only the owner of the house can do that. So we have to fix the planet one village, one city ward, one place at a time. It's not like we can keep making these bad trade-offs in our places and suddenly have good outcomes on the planet, right? How many ever solar panels we throw at it? We're not going to get out of this.
Yeah. So speaking about this house, and the focus of Good Food Talks is always the food. Let's talk about the kitchen and the trade-offs that we can make in the kitchen.
Yes.
That we can speak of.
I also run a small hospitality chain, and there we talk about this very often. There are places which are out there in the village, out there in the farms. We really start from the ingredients and not from the recipe. Right? If you think about it, if we lived like that, if we looked around and found what is available today around us, what's available in the market, what's growing by the stream, what's in season right now, and then decided on what you're going to cook, you would always be in sync with the planet. In the city, in a restaurant, you have a menu card, you start with the recipe first, and you expect carrots to appear in July, right? Which is absurd, which is not great for the planet. Right? So it's a fundamental paradigm shift. And how you operate your kitchen and how you think of food is how you need to think of nature and your relationship with your place, with your natural world and with your surroundings. And I think that's a very powerful metaphor for the change we need for addressing something as large as climate.
So eat seasonal, eat local.
Absolutely. Start with the ingredients and not the recipe.
Very nice.
Yeah.
This conversation that I was, listening to where you spoke, where you were asked about the ODOP scheme, the one district, one produce scheme that's there, and how, while the intent with which this has been done is, possibly to ensure that we're going to get a lot of produce from each district.
Yeah.
It has led to a lot of monocropping.
Yeah.
And that monocropping probably has led to, of course, it would have led to the loss of biodiversity in that district, and the disappearance of things from our thali, isn't it? Like what we would have eaten maybe 15-20 years back, I'm sure is not there anymore.
No, you're not eating one thing in a district,
right?
Yeah. So I mean, it's a very colonial view of the world when we start to look at places as resource centers. This produces coal, that produces coffee. This is where rice comes from. That is where wheat comes from. This is a very colonial way of looking at the world. These places are somebody's home, right? They grow fruit. They had the wild. You had broom grasses there. You were making brooms out of. You made pickle out of it. You made pots out of the mud. You had a variety of things happening there.
Yeah.
It's not just a shrinkage of biodiversity, it's a shrinkage of imagination. To reduce people, to reduce entire populations to being resource providers for you is not a very healthy way to create a country. So this idea of an ODOP is fundamentally very flawed, right? And it's interesting that we were in an ODOP district, I will not name it for obvious reasons, which is an ODOP district for banana. And their own banana used to come from Andhra for most of the year. Right? Go figure. This is not what the district was doing historically. They had their own mustard oil, and now they import that. They import their vegetables in. They import even their banana in, because all the banana from there is actually sold to traders. Right? So this supply chain and procurement chain view of our places, of our people, of our production systems is a very poor one. At most, it should have been a byproduct of what we do, not the core driver and not the core engine. So ideas like the ODOP fly in the face of what the government itself is trying to promote towards natural farming and more diversity. So I think, we really need to get out of some of this really, really quickly.
Coming to, when food is transported to the cities, the packaging in which it comes, and the problem of plastic that really exists today. 350,000 different kinds of material has been ingested into the biosphere, and now it's being found in our bloodstream, in the cells. Newborns are being born with it, right? that remains as this one big problem, which we are possibly, again, we don't have the imagination to maybe know what this problem really is taking us towards. I mean, we're hearing about it. Some of us are hearing about it, but we don't know what to do with it, with that information. And on the other side, if you see the villages, are getting again flooded with material that is coming from the city into the village, and they don't know what to do with all the waste that is getting generated over there. And same thing happened with my village, which is close to ODOP, and I used to go there from when I was a little girl, and now when I'm going there, and I'm walking on the same streets, and it's just there's so much of waste there, and diapers and things that are just thrown, and nobody knows what to do with it. And I asked my sister, and she says, no, I think once in 15 days someone comes and clears it up, but what happens to it, where does it go? And as a kid, when I would go to that village, there was self-sufficiency, complete self-sufficiency in that in that little house that was there, right? And it's completely gone. Everything is coming from outside. At Akshayakalpa, we launched a recycling initiative. We wanted to address this, and we said, while we're doing amazing work in the back end, we were guilty of polluting the planet, and we said we want to own up our waste, and we started taking back the waste from our customers.
That's fantastic.
The thing that we did was we said we'll make it really, really simple. As a consumer, you just need to do 3 things. You need to rinse the packet, dry it, and just drop it in the bag which is hanging on your gate. Right? I don't think any other brand in the country has been able to do this, which is taking your waste back from the consumer on a daily basis. And we were able to crack that because we have the supply chain to do that, because the delivery agent anyways is going every day, right? We have champions of this cause. Around 15% of the Akshayakalpa customer base is recycling, but we're not able to get it to 100%. And we felt that if we solve the convenience part of it, right, which is make it really, really simple for the consumer to just drop it in the bag which is hanging on your door or hanging on your gate, that there'll be more people, there'll be more takers for an initiative like this, right? 15% is still good, but we want to take it to 100%, and we're struggling with it. What would be your advice to brands like us? How do we, what should we communicate? What should we do to get more and more people to recycle?
So I'm part of that 15%. So, and thanks for starting this, because it really solves a big problem if like you're right, if every brand did this, we would already get to EPR without the government having to mandate it. What do you do about the 85%? I don't know. I think we are at a point in history where, if challenged, people would discard religion before convenience. Convenience is the true mother goddess, right? And a very strange perception of convenience. It's also more abstracted because you don't see the negative from it, because it's cleared away from your doorstep. You don't see how it actually finds its way back into your own kids' bloodstreams. So you have excuses like, I don't have the time. What's the point of doing that? It's the government's job. I'm paying my taxes. But it's your own kids' bloodstream, right? And I don't think we see this. I don't think we see that finally 8 billion individuals on the planet acting in sync can change this, right? And just because nobody else is doing it right now is not a good enough reason to not start. Unfortunately or fortunately, every better trade-off is not going to be biased towards convenience, right? But this is why you go to the gym, and this is why you sweat it out, because it's better strength, it's better health.
And it's not convenient.
It's not convenient. You do a lot of things. A lot of good in life doesn't come from what's classically convenient. And by the way, great health, your kids' longevity, all of these things are very, very convenient in the long run. Right? I think we have to change the larger social dialogue. I think we have to, thanks to Akshayakalpa for trying this, but I don't think it's up to Akshayakalpa alone. It's all of us. Right? This is why I apologize to the 27-year-olds and below. because not enough of us are honestly taking this responsibility on, and we need to really start.
Can you speak to us about some of the work that Rainmatter has done in the space of food and some insights that that you have come across as a part of doing that work?
So yeah, like I said, it became very, very obvious to us early on that changes in food systems, the supply chain around food systems, local production and consumption patterns, all of these things are very important. So we realized early on that the food systems, that it's a very core part of the climate problem, right? Both in terms of cause and impact. And resilience in the food systems, changing the food systems to be a lot more bioregionally relevant is a very large part of the answer. So we are working with think tanks to see what needs to change, for instance, in policy. If we were measuring nutrition instead of yield, or also measuring nutrition, we would actually chase very different outcomes. Right? We would not be in a good place from the numbers point of view right now. Similarly, if we were chasing fertilization instead of fertilizer sales, right, we'd have very different outcomes. So if we were looking at soil health as a major indicator of our national asset base, we would have very different outcomes. Right? So how do we shift policy? How do we shift consumer preferences in terms of the difference in standard of living and quality of life? Right? A pizza may be great standard of living, but it's definitely not great health and quality of life in the long run. Right? So making better choices bias towards quality of life, towards smarter choices in the consumer space. Working with brands which are working towards biodiversity linkages, towards local production systems, and so on and so forth. Akshayakalpa is one brand like that. We are working with the Moonshine meadery in Pune. They make meads out of honey, so they're supporting a lot of beekeeping and so on and so forth. There's Organic Mandya, it's supporting a lot of organic produce and so on and so forth, and a whole host of others. So consumers need better choices. Consumers need to make better decisions. Policy needs to support it, and farmers need to have the know-how, confidence to actually move to more diverse food production systems, more locally adapted food production systems, more agroforestry systems, and so on and so forth. From a resilience perspective, from a diversity perspective, from an income diversity perspective, and from a nutrition perspective, right? It's strange and weird that in farmland India you have a nutrition problem. The source of the food is where you have a nutrition problem, right? That's just painful to hear about. So these are some of the areas we are working with a lot of partners on.
So do you think money can solve the food problem, the nutrition problem that we are facing?
Soil can solve the food problem, right? Diversity can solve the food problem. Money used as grease and not fuel can help, right? But money alone is insufficient. Money has actually been worsening the problem over the last few decades, right? Money is again a tool, and like every other tool, you can use it to the purpose and the chase you have. So I don't think money is an answer in itself. It can be used wiser.
So can you speak a little bit about the bioregional economy that you keep mentioning, and why it is important for our well-being?
Somebody much wiser than I once said very beautifully that geography is destiny. And if you look at your food, your language, your history, your culture, your tradition, your folk songs, everything is a function of geography. If you're Brahmin in Mithila, you rebrand fish as the fruit of the sea, and you're vegetarian otherwise. Of the fruit of the river, I'm sorry. Right? So you owe everything that is in the human realm to your geography. And that's where it came from. India had 700 plus varieties of broom, grasses, and palm leaves from which brooms were made. And so we had these professions. We had a variety of brooms. We had a variety of goats. We had a variety of grains. We had a variety of beers. Right? We had a variety of everything. We were a very rich country, right? Like the Romans also realized. We had pepper to pluck from the wild and give to them.
Yeah.
We had crazy variety in wildlife while we were doing ours as well, right? We were a function of a bioregion, and which is why environmentally, ecologically, there was no stress on these systems, and they continue to sustain us. There were various stressors on human populations from other humans and also from the natural world. But overall, this was a system in equilibrium. This used to sustain itself and continue. Today, that is in question, right? So while we rearrange energy, while we try to find answers in this, that, and everything else, I think it's important to study and understand our geography. If I'm in a region with 500 mm of rainfall, right, I better not be growing paddy. It does not matter what canal flows in my region. It does not matter what depth I get water from a borewell from. Right? I better not make choices that lead me to the destruction of that aquifer. Right? Because that's where my asset base is. That's where my future lies. Right? So if my growing habits, if my food habits, if my festivals as a region of that, if everything is in sync with my geography, I'm likely to sustain myself, my civilization, my family, my assets for a much longer term. That's the core of bioregionalism. Wow. Right? And everything evolves from that. Your political structures, why kingdoms look different on the East Coast and the West Coast, whereas the West Coast had a lot more trading. Why social organizations looked very different in the Himalayas, right, compared to the plains, compared to the central tribes and the Deccan Plateau and the Western Ghats. Right? All of this owes itself to the geography. And the more we recognize that, today we do not recognize, we were driving up a street near, on the outer ring road in Girinagar, and there's a traffic light right at the top of the hill. All the vehicles are struggling to stay in place, when the light turns green.
Yeah.
It is urban design that refuses to acknowledge geography.
Yeah.
You don't understand which way the water flows. You don't understand where the wind comes in from. You don't understand where your fire risks are from anymore in a urban or a rural context. These are important things that were understood when you lived in sync with your place.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to do that, because if you don't do that, then multiplied at across places across the planet, you are out of sync with your planet. And that's where we are today.
And we had all this knowledge, isn't it? Like when you look back at some of the, you go to archaeological places and you see how the structures were built back then, it was built in sync with the geography of the place.
It was not even a question of intent. It was how it happened. It was evolution. It was social evolution. Yeah. It was because of the constraints we have. Right? If you are in a place with a lot of, let's say, sandstone, you will build out of sandstone.
Yeah.
If you have laterite, you will build out of laterite. And guess what? It tends to work for you.
So
because the material has been in the place for a reason.
Yeah.
If you have a lot of paddy, you will create roofs from at the end of the cycle, right? So your architecture, your social norms around it, right? Because it needs a lot of labor. So neighbors get together and everybody does everybody's roof together. We did not depend on the market for that. You did not have to pay a labor cost for that. You had a rich set of options available right in your neighborhood. Right. So I think it was natural evolution, and there was a beauty to it that we have started ignoring the moment we got explosive energy in the form of a barrel of oil. Right. So we got a little drunk on oil. So I think it's time to revisit that and understand our landscapes better.
Yeah, like even if you look at the villages of India, for example, like the way the houses were being constructed back then were in sync with the climate of that village, right? Like Udupi had,
yes,
those roofs with the
more protected on the western side because that's where the monsoon came in from.
Yeah. And lot more ventilation.
Yes.
Like growing up, the little house that was there had wooden windows with no,
shutters.
Yeah, there were no shutters, and the doors were made of wood and all of it. Like even in that hot village, you could still sleep.
Yeah.
And the night would still be cool because of the house that was built.
Yeah.
And now, and when the next generation started building, it looks like a city house, but it has its own problems. If you're not sitting under the fan, for example, you can't survive over there anymore.
Yeah.
So,
we I think we had our places figured out. Now we don't.
Yeah. And I think it's also because of the aspirations of I think, that there was a mismatch in aspiration probably. Like we wanted, villages also to be like cities, for example.
Aspiration is a funny word.
Yeah.
I mean, all my neighbors want to create handmade soap and artisanal jams and, hand pounded spices and all sorts of interesting things. Why is the village's aspiration just consumption now? What trickery happened in between where, a set of producers reduced to just a set of consumers in their aspiration, and all their aspirations was sourced in production elsewhere. So I don't buy this idea of an aspiration being a natural driver of this change. I think it's something that got seeded as part of a larger process, because Bangalore's aspiration is around rock and heavy metal. Chennai's aspiration is around Carnatic music. Aspiration is not a uniform thing. But Chennai produces that Carnatic music, and Bangalore produces that, hard rock. So when your aspiration is around being a producer and a consumer of a large set of goods, services, leisure, what have you, then it's healthy. In this form, I don't think we should just accept the aspiration word at face value so easily. Yeah.
So there's a report to say that, the food consumption habits of India is one of the most sustainable in the world. And that's because of millets and, the consumption of millets in India. And if rest of the world follows suit, 30% of, emissions can be controlled because of growing millets, right? But when you look at consumption, like, are people in the cities, like, are we going in that direction, or do you think we're just kidding ourselves when it comes to millet consumption?
Yeah, I shy away from anything that starts to sound like a silver bullet, right?
Yeah.
Just millet is not an answer. It's part of the answers, but it's not an answer by itself. You can actually get into situations where you're doing monocrops of millets, being sold on the same procurement and supply chains, leading to the same set of problems. Yes, you'll have a little bit of a win on water, but you'll create 10 other problems. So it's a whole farming system. It's a whole economy. It's a whole food system, right? Looking at it as millets alone or, dairy alone or one thing alone is not going to cut it. It's a deeper belief in your place, understanding of your place and what it does across the year, what you need out of it, and how these two things can be in sync, right? Rather than run after silver bullet A or silver bullet B. I think we should just avoid that conversation altogether.
Yeah. So what do you think is the future of food?
Future of food is great. The future of humans less so. Right. I think I'm hoping, I'm staying optimistic on the fact that we are starting to realize some of these things. There's a larger conversation around bioregionalism, understanding your geography better, and as a result, your local foods and food systems better. It's also a signal to, for instance, millets, especially ragi around where we are, was almost signaled to be a poor man's food, right? Which is why it also went out of fashion. So now with this reversal, we might actually send different signals out there saying, no, this is cool, this is good, this is great for your nutrition, this is the smart choice, right? PDS rice is not a smart choice, right? So if you are able to change the social conversation, then change the policy as a follow-up of this. In Odisha, it's already happened. Millets are a very big part of the formal systems over there. I think the future of food could start to. I think we have turned the curve, right? How fast it turns and how much it can keep with the changing climate right now is the only big question we have.
Yeah. There's some hope.
Yes, there's some hope.
Okay, what's your favorite Akshayakalpa product?
Whoa, okay. We buy milk every day, of course. The yogurt is really good. I think you should probably talk about it in terms of like the best yogurt ever types. And I once had a pepper cheese.
Yeah, the chili cheese, the pepper cheese cheddar.
Yeah, that's fantastic as well. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Sameer. This was a beautiful conversation, and I know there's a lot of grimness to it, but thank you for ending it on a slightly hopeful note.
My pleasure.
And I feel like as consumers, the responsibility is on us to make more conscious choices. As marketers also, I feel the responsibility is on us to make more of these hardy crops cool. If you can do that, there'll be more and more takers for it.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on the show.
My pleasure.